just finished this a second ago. The ending of this book has broken me. Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be reviewing Empire of Storms by Sara J. Maas. As you guys know, I've been reading through the Throne of Glass series, and I always try to avoid spoilers, but just because this is like, let's see, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows. This is book 5, depending on if you count The Assassin's Blade, the prequel. So it will kind of automatically have spoilers just because of that. So watch at your own peril, I guess. So the cliffhanger at the end of Queen of Shadows, or not, it wasn't really a cliffhanger. It felt like kind of some loose ends were tied up and it felt like a shift in the series, but it still ended on a note that was like, you know, what's going to happen next kind of thing. And it kind of divided the characters where, you know, one particular character is injured, and basically that story continues in Tower of Dawn. And I chose not to do the in tandem read, so I started with Empire of Storms. The other characters obviously were in this book. So this book does not stop or slow down. Like, holy moly, this book just keeps going. My cousin and I have talked about how it's similar to like Fourth Wing, and she has this really good line that she said. It was like, it's what Fourth Wing strived to be, because I remember talking about Fourth Wing and how it's like really intense, and right before, you know, and everything kind of calms down, and then right before you get really bored, it picks back up again. This is that, but there's no down moments. It's just go, go, go. You have a few moments to breathe, but it's like Sara J. Maas in this particular book, and every book, but this one in particular, is absolutely like really a pro at writing situations that feel so intense and suspenseful. It's like you're flipping pages and your heart's pounding because you feel like you're in this situation and you just got to keep reading. And she's also really good at like monsters and things like that. So this is where, I mean, it's been kind of epic fantasy since Heir of Fire, really, but in this one there are like so many POVs, it's hard to remember every detail. I do feel like the side characters really shined in this book. I feel like Aylin's perspective was kind of like just okay to me, and there were some interesting parts with her, but for me, I felt like I fell in love with more side characters and all of their perspectives than I did hers, if that makes sense. And to me, Aylin, I guess I'll just start talking about Aylin and then go through, but to me, Aylin's character she had such a big developmental arc. From Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight kind of set the foundation. Heir of Fire was like her big arc, and Queen of Shadows kind of continued that. And I feel like she's gone through such a huge arc that in this book she plateaus and her development stays the same. And so there's not a whole lot of growth or change for her in this book, and that's kind of why the side characters all shine, because for a lot of the side characters, they were just introduced either last book or the book before then, or some of them introduced in this book, and so their character arcs are kind of just beginning and forming, if that makes sense. So I also did feel like Aylin's character kind of annoyed me a little bit, in the sense that she never trusted her companions, and I know that a lot of people have mentioned and talked about this before, and the primary discussion is that she doesn't trust people because of her past, and I get that. It's a valid reason. I just disagree with it and don't like it, because to me, I get not trusting, like, you know, casual people that you start working with, like the pirate captain or a commander or general over here or whatever. Or the people that you just encounter in this book or have recently encountered. And even like Dorian, she's known him since Throne of Glass, but I can understand still not trusting him with certain pieces of information. However, it doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense with her cousin, whom she trusts with her life and beyond, and her mate. Those two in particular were the ones that annoyed me the most, that she didn't tell her plans to, especially given that her cousin's a general and Rowan has been a Fey male fighting longer than she's been alive, so he knows more about fighting and warfare than she does. And the fact that she's only 19 and I know she's been trained in like all that stuff, and she's definitely not a Rey character or a Mary Sue, because she's earned every bit of the power that she has, really, because of her character arcs and all these books that we've gone through with her. And Assassin's Blade in particular, the prequel, prequel really sets that in stone. But she's still, like, in my mind, it's still, like, less than what Rowan knows and less than what Aoden knows, knowing how much warfare combat he's been in. Because for Aelin, aka Selena, it's like she's been in a lot of fights, she's been in a lot of assassin situations and missions, she knows how to fight and kill, she has a lot of power, but she hasn't been in an actual war, like battle and warfare and killing fields and stuff like that. Aoden has, Rowan has, and I feel like that it would have been, because she doesn't have much of an arc right now, I feel like it would have been better to have her have a little bit of an arc where she learns to listen to them more, and she did at the end. Like, the end, for some reason, she changed her mind and just started listening to them after Aoden in particular confronted her, but it was just kind of annoying because it's like more the author doing it rather than the character, like, showing that the character has actual valid reasons for not telling things. And generally speaking, characters not communicating clearly with each other is a very, 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 very bad trope, and people hate it when it's done, especially if it's not done right. So that's Aelin's character, but like I said, she's one POV out of like a whole bunch. I don't even remember how many POVs are in this book. So I love Aoden's character. I felt for him a lot in this book, being frustrated with Selena and being left in the dark because he's the general. And I feel like a lot of times Selena and this other friend, the shapeshifter Lysandra, they annoyed me in the very beginning of this book, the first half of it, because they would always treat him like, oh, you're just a man, we're the women, we know everything, and you know nothing, and we know what we're doing, and we don't have to tell you anything, and you're just this, like, man, you're just this dog. And it's just like, they treated him so badly. It was like the feminism coming out. The feminism in this book really, really drove me insane, and it wasn't until the last several hundred pages that it kind of went away and got better, but it was really difficult for me to deal with, like, frustrating wise, because of the way, specifically the way that Aelin and Lysandra treated Aoden. And the ironic thing is that sometimes there was Aoden's perspectives when he would talk with Lysandra, and it wouldn't be mission based, and they would have these moments with each other that was really sweet, and it was like, it allowed me to see Lysandra through his eyes, and I softened toward her, but I just didn't like some of the scenes and the comments that they made toward him. And there's a few comments that, like, Aelin made when another female comes up and he's possessive over the woman he's in love with, and she makes, like, snide, rude, I can't remember exactly how she says it, but, oh, you're just being a typical fae, and then she says a bad word, basically. So, and Rowan didn't even take that as an insult, but it kind of, like, that's kind of what the fae males are like, especially when they end up mating and getting with a woman, they get possessive over them. And they weren't doing it, like, in that scene. It was very justified because that guy had just watched his woman almost bleed out and die. So in my mind, it made sense for him to be, like, really intense at that moment about protecting her. And I didn't feel like that was called for. And it's just the feminism coming out where it's like the women are important, the men are just stupid. And I mean, not directly like that, but that's kind of the message that it sends out. And I did not like that. And I really wish the men could have their moments to shine. And for the most part of this book, they didn't until the very end. And it paid off. And I do feel like that payoff was worth it. But I did want to note the fact that the beginning of this book was driving me crazy. So I really love Elid's character. I feel like she's the epitome of a good, strong female character because she's actually very, very strong. She's endured and survived so much, and she doesn't know how to fight. And not every strong female character who is strong has to be physically strong or know how to fight. I feel like it's better when you actually portray a female character that's strong in other ways, because there's more than just strength. There's more than that particular way to be strong, if that makes sense. But Elid's character was really fun. Her and Lorcan and their whole plot line, disguising themselves in this circus and having to hide and pretend to be married and fighting all this stuff and encountering all these monsters, it was a blast. I loved Elid and Lorcan, and they're actually my favorite couple in this particular book. So I'm excited to see the whole series and actually, like, rank the couples and the characters, and then actually revisit my ranking romantasy couples to see if, sorry about the sound of the air conditioner, to see if it's actually, like, if how they stand up against the other couples. So I really loved Lorcan's character. I feel like he has him and Elide has a huge character arc, because we knew Elide from Queen of Shadows, and her character arc, like, her character is growing so much, and she really stands out as like almost main character energy compared to Aelin, because Aelin's not growing, she's plateaued. Lorcan, like, this was the first book we got his perspective, even though I think we knew about him, and he was very prominent as a character, an antagonist in Queen of Shadows, but we finally go to his perspective. So he's going through an arc because of his change and his situation with Elide and all that stuff. So I really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed their romance. Lorcan and Elide are so precious. As I said, I loved Eowyn's character, and he softened me toward Lysandra, and I feel like the moments that we got Lysandra's perspective, I didn't actually hate her in those particular scenes where we went to her perspective, because it was like when she shapeshifted, like as the sea dragon in this one big epic fight, and it was actually pretty cool to get her perspective for that. It was just some of the scenes from Aelin's perspective where her and Lysandra are together being feminists against the men was what drove me crazy. What else? I actually was genuinely surprised, because I remember mentioning in my last review, it was either Heir of Fire or Queen of Shadows, probably, I think it was Heir of Fire, when Manon, or Manon, however you pronounce her name, first came into the series, how I hated her. I did not like her. She was very weird. It was very stunning to get it was kind of like a shock, like culture shock almost, to get her perspectives and her character, but it's paying off now. Her character arc in this book is huge. Where she ends up in this book is amazing and fun, and her character and where it's propelling her forward, and now we can see why we needed those perspectives in Heir of Fire and in Queen of Shadows. We can see where it was going in this book, where it's heading in the rest of the series. Her relevance to the series as a whole, to the plot line, to the bigger picture, has been really fun to like read, and also her personal character arc. Her relationship with Dorian, I feel like it works for both of them and what their characters are and who they are right now and what they're going through, especially Dorian. I don't think it works as a romance that actually is a good one, if that makes sense. But it's one of those situations where, because of what Dorian's gone through and what he's lost, he wants a fling to help him forget about his loss, and he needs a woman who is not really a human, who is not as fragile, and like, it's kind of twisted and it's toxic in a way. Not really toxic, in my opinion. It's toxic because it's all based on physical attraction, but to me it works just because it's like a bad thing that they're both doing that isn't going to work as a relationship yet, unless they start to develop that emotional connection, if that makes sense. So it annoyed me, but it makes sense for both of their characters. So and it's not meant to be an emotional connection. Like, Lorcan and Elide build up this emotional connection with each other. They work, it goes from enemies to friends to enemies to allies to lovers, and so it works with this progression. Aelin and Rowan's relationship for the past Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows, so the past 2 books, has built up to this one, so it did feel kind of like a payoff. Lorcan and Elide specifically have one scene that was actually really good, that kind of did get steamy, I will say, but it was emotionally paid off, and it worked so well. The rest of the spice in this book didn't work. I feel like it was, for me at least, just because I don't really like spice, but it's been earned, especially for Aelin and Rowan, and for Lorcan and Elide. So the only one that I really hated especially was Dorian and Manon. Or Manon, whatever. Let's see, who else do we run into? So, yeah, the boss, okay, Sara J. Maas has this habit of doing a boss fight, and then you think everything's fine, and then you're relaxing, and you're like, okay, we're just gonna kind of smooth it, and then the last 100 pages, just like, everything happens, and you're just in this whirlwind of chaos with the endings of her books. And this was pretty much the same thing, except there was like 2 or 3 or 4 boss fights where you're like, okay, this has got to be it, right? Nope, there's something else going, there's something else on the horizon, there's something else over there. It's chaos, but it's so fun, and I'm here for it. And it made like yesterday binge reading and today so much fun, because you're just like, what's gonna happen next? So the initial situation that they get into, what I thought was going to be kind of the first boss fight, if you will, in the marshes. So for those of you who know, you know what I'm talking about. That started to annoy me, because it was like, you're in a situation where I actually thought that they were going to have to plan everything out, and these 8 characters have to work together to figure out how to get out of this situation. And it ended up being kind of like that, but Aelin was kind of like the one who got to be the hero, and it was driving me insane, because you have all these epic dudes who have been built up as big bad warriors, and they never get to actually be big bad warriors, because it's always Aelin saving everybody's butts. But that needed to happen for a reason, so I was really annoyed with that, but that happened for a reason in the plot line that paid off. And then that was kind of like taken out of the situation, and then the men got to be the heroes, because there was a whole situation. Aelin wasn't there, the men had to handle everything, and they got to shine. There was a battle that lasted multiple perspectives, multiple chapters, everybody's doing something crazy, and then Aelin had her own thing, and I feel like Aelin's ending arc was really good. Then there was other situations, the twist at the end, the emotional twist at the end was, oh my gosh, so intense. There was a situation with Lorcan and Elite that made me cry, but that was earlier on. I didn't cry at the emotional twist, but I did get a lot of feels. And it's kind of left everybody in a little bit of a, like, not everybody, because actually there's one character who is kind of in trouble, and a side character. So, and I'm like really interested to find out what's going to happen next with that situation, because it's kind of like the pieces are moving, the pieces are kind of in place. I just wish that Aelin had involved more people in getting those pieces into place, because it kind of paid off, but it was like one of those situations where it almost didn't pay off, because she didn't tell anybody and she didn't work with anybody to do it. It was just her, and that kind of drove me crazy a little bit, because it's like, the other thing that was negative about this book, and I feel like is the book's biggest issue, is that you have these really intense situations. I've already complimented Sara J. Maas's writing of how intense it is, and you're just like, oh my gosh, are they going to die? Who's going to die? What's going to happen? How are they going to get out of this? Like, they get into some really difficult situations that you're like, there's no way somebody's not going to die. And it's so intense that they get into the situation, but then, Aelin and her fire, everything's fine. And it's like Aelin and her fire solve everything in this book, so you lose that intense suspense of and worry and fear for the characters. And I talked about this in our podcast the other day, but it's like the Walker Texas Ranger problem. So if you know the TV show Walker Texas Ranger, I loved it as a kid, because as a kid it's like really fun, but I don't think I could binge watch it as an adult, because it's like Walker always saves the day and he never gets hurt or beat in a fight, basically. And that's kind of like the rule. And it's like, in that it's like this, but like it doesn't really work in this context, because this is trying to be an epic fantasy. It is kind of an epic fantasy with romantic subplots for most of the characters, but it's like there's still the whole Aelin, up until a certain point, has plot armor and always solves every situation, and she does it by herself. So it'd be one thing if she solves every problem but together, so it's like the group working together to solve the problem, like Fairy Tail. An anime called Fairy Tail is one that has that same thing, where the hero, they always make it out alive, so they always survive. But, and Natsu, the main male character, because that's usually an anime, it's always the main protagonist, and so he does outshine everybody else, but the whole guild works together to solve whatever problem's going on. And in this case, there was no camaraderie, and I think it's like Aelin keeping it to herself, solving the problems on her own, always getting them out of the situation because of her fire and power, and just being overly epic, and also being so OP and having no consequences or price for that, really kind of makes this like to where it's not as epic as it could have been, if that makes sense. Because I'm always like, I don't know if it's like a logic thing, because magic isn't real or logical, but for me, it goes back to the whole quote from Once Upon a Time, all magic comes with a price. Hopefully I can find a Rumpelstiltskin quote to put there. But it's like kind of true. All magic, this amount of power should have some sort of consequence to it, and it doesn't. And it's just like she can do everything, and she can solve everything, and she can beat everybody, and the fire can burn everything, and so Aylin's never going to get in trouble because she can always get out of it. And it kind of does solve that a little bit at the end with the emotional twist, and I guess for me that's why it wasn't emotional, is because it was kind of like, oh, okay, this was kind of due to happen and should have happened sooner. You know what I'm saying? Like, because she finally got into some trouble that I don't know how she's going to get out of, if she can, and somebody may actually have to help her for once. But it wasn't emotional for me. It's like, oh, poor Aylin and what she's going through. Instead it was like, oh, finally somebody's actually one-upping her. You know what I'm saying? And that's the wrong mentality, because it was supposed to be emotional. And it was, don't get me wrong, because of the nature of the situation, and everybody was involved in it. So it was like one of those, oh my gosh, you poor thing kind of feels. But it's still like, at the same time, you still have the undertone of this whole book, she's been able to get out of every situation. And it just didn't quite hit quite as hard for her character as it should have, because the feels for me was like everybody else involved in what they were feeling about the situation, not her specifically, other than a few things that did happen that was like really bad, and you're like, oh, I feel bad for her because of that. But and also one other thing from a writing standpoint I want to know, because I always try to link it back to writing if I can remember, but if a plan is going to succeed, from the good guy's perspectives, you don't tell us what the plan is, okay? And you skip over that part, and then the plan works and succeeds. If it's not going to work, that's when you break down the plan for us and tell us what their plan is, because then something's going to go wrong. That's how that usually works. She did that very well. However, there's also this whole aspect of you deliberately don't tell your readers something because you want to reveal it in a big way later on and have it be a twist that, like, oh, behind the scenes this was going on and this character was working on this particular thing, and now you can be surprised and it's really epic, and then you're like, oh my gosh, and it's like this cool thing. But if you do that over and over and over and over again, it loses its value. It's like the more you have of something, the less it's worth. It's the same kind of mentality where it's like, now you're never telling us anything, so we're always confused about what's really going on. And then it's like, oh, here we go again. She didn't tell anybody the plan, and there's something else that she had cooked up. Oh, here we go again. And it's literally the same thing rehashed over and over and over again. So I sound like I'm complaining, but there was so much positive about this book that it's automatically like a 5-star read, just because of how there's so many perspectives. It's true epic fantasy at its finest. There's enough romantic subplots that actually do work, that it also has that aspect too, because I love romance and fantasy. There's tons of action. This book does not slow down at all. So the bad things kind of stand out, but it's like, it's still like really good. So I'm honestly don't know what I'm gonna rate this book, because it's the action and the plot line and the intense situations is even better than Queen of Shadows. So it's staying true to form, where the series keeps getting better and better and better with every book. But this one had more issues in it than Queen of Shadows or Heir of Fire, just because of Aylin always solving everything and never telling anybody how she's solving everything. And so we're always in the dark, and everybody's in the dark for no reason. So, but I don't know if that's a big enough issue to dock it a star. And I was like, I don't want to give it 4.5 stars, because it feels like it's even like the whole, like I said, everything is picking up for every single character in this book, and it's even better than Queen of Shadows. And so I'm kind of like in this dilemma of, I don't know what I would rate it. So I'm probably still going to rate it 5 stars, just with a lot of the critiques that I've had for this book, that it could have been even more impactful than it really was. So, hey guys, so quick insert I wanted to add to my review of Empire of Storms. This is the next day I kind of sat on it and thought about it for a bit. Another thing that really irked me about the whole hiding things from the team is the big thing that she hid from them at the end was something that her, Aylin, and the other girl, Lysandra, that she always works with, the shapeshifter, hid this big plan that, spoiler alerts for Empire of Storms. But essentially it was like a plan for Aelin knew she was going to die, so Lysandra would shapeshift into her for the rest of her life so that the inner circle would know that Aelin was dead, but nobody else would, and it could bring peace to the kingdom. But as the shapeshifter, any children that she would have would look like the shapeshifter's real appearance and not Aelin. So her plan was to have Lysandra have children with Aelin's cousin Eowyn because he looks like her, and therefore the children would look more like her, more like Aelin, and then they would pretend like those children are Rowans. So Eowyn was naturally really mad about this, and this is the issue that I have with that, because not only, this is like talking about having children without somebody's consent, and this whole situation, like Rowan would be like his wife at this, in this hypothetical scenario, Aelin's dead, so his mate, his wife, is dead. He's not only having to deal with a shapeshifter pretending to be her and everybody in the kingdom thinking that she's still alive and having to pretend to be her king and in love with her when he's not, but then he would be having to pretend like these children are his when they're not his, and he would never have the chance to have kids with Aelin because Aelin in this hypothetical scenario would be dead. Then you're talking about Eowyn having children with somebody that he may not consent to, and he may not consent to the idea of having kids and may not even want kids. And also having to have children that would then he would have to pretend like aren't even his. And none of them were consulted about this, and this was the actual plan. They weren't told. So it's non-consent, it's like going against consent. It is going against, like, but because the women did it, it's fine. I haven't heard anybody outraged about it, and it's the women doing it to the men. But imagine, just take this scenario and flip it and have the men be doing this behind the women's backs. The world would be in a rage. Okay, like the fans, everything would be in a rage if it was reversed. And then, like, they weren't told, but like it's a missed opportunity for a good plot line of like them telling them the plan to begin with, and then this whole book like arguing about it and fighting about it, and like then the twist at the end being that this was the only plan that could save them. And that would be a really good twist of irony, that like Eowyn, this plan that Eowyn and Rowan had been disagreeing with the whole time was then the only plan that could save everybody. That would be poetic. But it's extremely toxic, and that's my fear going into Kingdom of Ash, is that it will be portrayed as okay that Aelin and Lysandra did this, instead of, okay, you guys, like, if the characters make a mistake and do something bad, that is fine. Characters can make mistakes. They should be flawed and should make mistakes. The issue I would have with it is if it is then portrayed as okay that Aelin and Lysandra did this. And if the men don't actually get upset over it, if they're not written that way, because anyone in the right mind would be. And it's like a violation of trust. And I don't want Eowyn and Lysandra to be together, because that is a violation of trust in their relationship. Now, if she seeks forgiveness from him, then maybe. But I don't want it to be portrayed as okay, because that is extremely wrong and toxic, regardless of gender. So I wanted to add that to my review for Empire of Storms. So please be respectful in the comments below if you disagree, but that's wrong. And I feel like it should be called out, instead of, oh, because it's Aelin and because it's Lysandra and they're the main female characters and everybody loves them, that it's okay. Like, that's not okay, no matter who does it. And I hope that it's portrayed as such. For me, it's like, I guess it would be a 4.5 star read for me. But there you have it. That is my review for Empire of Storms by Sara J. Maas. Have you guys read this book? What did you think about all of this and the book and everything else? And did you do the in tandem read with Tower of Dawn, or did you do it like me where you're reading Empire of Storms first and then Tower of Dawn? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And if you agree or disagree with me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just keep it respectful, because we can all have our own opinions about things. And if you liked this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in the meantime, if you like my review of Empire of Storms, then check out my review of Throne of Glass, because that's kind of like the book that started it all, and it's really fun to go back and see my reaction to Throne of Glass when I never imagined I would get past that book. So check it out. It's a fun adventure. You don't want to miss it.